Okay, I am so pleased to have here Brianna with the Seed Savers Exchange, a nonprofit organization to talk about seed saving in your garden. Hi, Brianna.
Oh, thanks for the introduction there, Erin. It sounds like you guys got quite the lineup at Winnetka-Northfield Public Library. That's awesome.
We always do. We really
Oh,
pack it in, and I find it all very interesting. So hopefully everyone
oh,
else does.
awesome, awesome. Well, very glad to be a part of your programs and offerings for the community. So, welcome everyone. Glad to have you here tonight. I'm assuming your being here means you have some interest in seed saving, or maybe more broadly gardening. And I'm excited to go over an introduction of how you can incorporate seed saving into your gardening if you haven't yet, or maybe you've already started doing some seed saving, but you're hoping to find some more information. But I think tonight will be a great exploration of that. So let's get into it. Just an overview of our time together this evening. I'll go into an introduction of Seed Savers Exchange, as Erin mentioned. I'm coming to you from Seed Savers Exchange. We're a nonprofit organization in Northeast Iowa. So I'll tell you a bit about us and the work we do. And then I'll talk a little bit about why you might be interested in saving seeds, and why this may be an important topic to talk about. And then we'll kind of get more into the technical stuff about saving seeds, which starts with growing for seed, and then knowing when to harvest seed, some tips on processing seed, storing, and then maybe my favorite part of seed saving, which is sharing seeds. And we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So let's do it. Okay, so here I wrote out the Seed Savers Exchange mission statement. So I'll start with that as our introduction to Seed Savers. So Seed Savers Exchange stewards America's culturally diverse and endangered garden and food crop legacy for present and future generations. We educate and connect people through collecting, regenerating, and sharing open pollinated seeds, plants, and stories. So that's our mission, basically preserving the connection between people and the plants growing in their gardens and the natural stories and diversity that arise from people being engaged with gardens and seeds. And so the way that we do this is through three main components of our work. The first is called The Exchange. It is both a paper publication. Oh, shoot, I don't have it on me. As well as a part of our website where gardeners across the United States, well, in the world, but primarily the United States and Canada, can list seeds that they have saved themselves in their gardens, that they want to share with other people. And so by listing it on the exchange, people can see that, oh, Brianna in Decorah, Iowa has a marigold. And then they can request that seed from me, which is a fantastic way to connect gardeners with seeds and to expose people to new seeds and to secure a diverse array of seeds, just by connecting gardeners. And so this past year, we had about 350 participants listing about 15,000 varieties in the exchange. So it's a big hub of biodiversity in the garden. We also have a seed bank, which is where my work is. I'm the seed bank manager here. And we have 20,000 plus varieties of garden vegetables and fruits that we are maintaining here. We preserve them in cold storage. We have both a freezer and a cooler so that the seeds will last longer. But a part of that is that every year we have to grow some out to renew the seed because seeds are living plants. So they won't last forever in the freezer. So every year we grow out several hundred different varieties to renew our seed. And we also evaluate the seeds that we're growing out. So out of the 20,000 plus varieties that we have in the seed bank, we don't have a lot of information for most of those varieties. Just by the way the seed bank grew, it was very fast and quick, and we didn't have a system in place in the beginning of what information we need to know. So we're growing and also evaluating. And then the way that most people are familiar with Seed Savers Exchange is that we have a catalog, a seed catalog that the proceeds from that financially support the preservation work of the exchange and the seed bank. Those are our big three, but that doesn't even cover everything we do. So that's a little introduction there to Seed Savers Exchange, and we'll come back later in this presentation to a little bit more about Seed Savers. Oh, but first, just since I'm coming to you from the seed bank, out of our 20,000 plus varieties, we have about 100 different crop types. The most varieties that we have are tomatoes, and the next crop type with the most varieties that we have are beans. And then third is actually apples. So I didn't mention this on the previous slide, but we also have 2 orchards where we are preserving about 1,000 different types of apple trees. And then squash. Squash is the 4th crop type that we have the most varieties of. And in 2023, I got to get my updated numbers for 2024. We were able to distribute about 2,500 different packets of seeds from the seed bank to the public, which is a very important part of preserving them. You know, we don't just want them to sit in the freezer. We want them to be out in people's hands and being grown and enjoyed by folks in their gardens. All right, so why save seeds? There's lots of different reasons. People might want to save seeds. Maybe there's different reasons that you're here and that you're specifically interested in saving seeds. But kind of boils down to 3 different, many times boils down to 3 different categories. One is connection, another is just practicality, and the third is biodiversity and selection. So connection, seeds, they connect a lot of things, but they connect people through time. They connect people to their food, to stories, and also to the garden, the soil that they're working with the seeds. And so this lovely picture I have here of this flower, it's called Grandpa Ott's Morning Glory. And then you can see this cute picture of an older couple, and it might be a little hard to tell, but they're kind of peeking out through vines, and those vines are the morning glory that's in this other picture. And this is actually, this flower, this Grandpa Ott's Morning Glory, is the story of how Seed Savers Exchange got started, and is a story of how seeds connect people through time and through story. So the people in this photo are the grandparents of Diane Ott Whaley, who is one of the co-founders of Seed Savers Exchange, along with her husband at the time, Kent Whaley. And as a girl growing up, Diane would spend time with her grandparents, especially in the summers. And one of the things she would do is not only spend time by these morning glories on this porch you can see here covered in them, but she would also help her grandpa collect seeds in the fall and plant them in the spring so that every year they would have these flowers. And so these flowers are just tied up in all these fond memories Diane had of spending time with her grandparents. And so when she and Kent got married, her grandfather gave her some of these morning glory seeds along with a tomato seed so that they could grow them at their new house. And you know, growing up, Diane knew that these were varieties that her grandparents saved every year, but she didn't think about it too much past that they had Depression era thrifty self-reliant tendencies. But she came to learn that these were varieties that her traced all the way back to her ancestors in Bavaria, and that they chose that were so special to them that they brought with them to the United States and that were passed down through the generations and now to her. So now these just weren't a flower and a tomato. They were connections to her ancestors. And she and Kent had this realization that since these are family heirlooms, um, she and Kent may have been the only people growing it. If, once her grandfather passed away, it might just be them. And they felt a lot of pressure that these flowers and the tomato were so dependent on them. And so they figured that if they could share these seeds with other people, that these seeds would have more secure places in the world if more people were growing and admiring them. And so that is how Seed Savers Exchange came to be. And so another reason someone might be interested in saving seeds is that it's practical, saves you money, makes you a little more self-reliant. I have this graphic here that is kind of impossible to see. I don't expect you to be able to see all the details, but you can probably see that there are 4 dots that are the biggest and they're red. Those are 4 chemical companies that own over 60% of the global seed market. And so saving your own seeds is a way to take more control of what seeds are available to you. And biodiversity and selection is another very important part of seed saving. So when you save your own seeds from plants that you grew, you can save seeds from the plants that did the best for you or that had the most desirable traits for you. Maybe you're looking for the biggest tomatoes, so you can save seeds from the biggest tomatoes, or maybe you're wanting to save seed from the tallest corn. When you're seed saving, that's something you can do. And then when you're saving seeds, they will also become naturally adapted to the area where you're growing them, because you're not going to be saving seeds from the plants that don't do well in your climate and don't do well with your weather, or that don't do well with your diseases and pests and all the things that affect plants in your area. You'll be saving seeds from ones that do well. And so, yeah, that's called locally adapting seeds, which is can be a very important way to get more yield from your plants, is just if they're doing better in your climate from you having saved the seeds. And I have a picture here of 2 different plants. So on the left, this bushier looking one is a wild plant called teosinte. It is the wild relative of corn, which you can see on the right-hand side. And so I just love this picture because it shows the power of the human seed connection and what can happen through people selecting for desirable traits through, generation after generation. So you can see that the teosinte seed head is just one small, it kind of looks like a grass head, and it's got some kernels. They're not very big. And so that's what humans started with, is just this small seed head with not very big kernels. But after generations and generations of selecting for the biggest, the most kernels, we ended up with modern day corn. So that's a pretty powerful relationship there. And here's another one of my favorite examples of the power of the human seed connection is Brassica oleracea. So, and I did not know this until I started working at Seed Savers Exchange, but cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, collards, broccoli, and cauliflower are all the same species of plant. But humans took this wild mustard plant you see at the very top there, real spindly looking, and by selecting for different parts of that plant, we ended up with these very different, delicious vegetables that we know, love, and eat today, and that feed and nourish so much of the world. So by selecting just for large terminal buds, we ended up with cabbage. For lateral buds, ended up with Brussels sprouts, stem, kohlrabi, and so on. But I just think that's so cool that just by having a relationship with this one plant, humans were able to create this variety of vegetables that fed and nourished them, their families, and their community in different ways and that are delicious. So, and of course, this kind of thing takes a long time to happen. Um, but it's not like by saving your own seeds, you're gonna be able to invent a new vegetable, but you're just participating in the process that over a very long time leads to these cool results. So those are some of the reasons someone might be interested in seed saving. Uh, so some basics of seed saving. We'll start getting into that now, but you'll hear me say this a lot this evening, is that a lot of seed saving is crop type dependent. So kind of my strategy for sharing seed saving concepts with people is that we'll talk about kind of like what to think about. Um, and then we'll go over some kind of basic crop types. And otherwise, if there's a crop type you're specifically interested in saving seed from that we don't go over this evening, you'll at least have an idea of what sort of information you will need to successfully save seeds from it. And so an essential toolkit, thankfully, for seed saving, aside from seeds and a place to grow them, really all you need is to know what your goals and purpose are. Seed saving will look very different for um, a seed contract grower for a company versus someone who's just saving seeds in their backyard, which is probably most of us tonight. Creativity goes a long way with seed saving. There's a lot of things you could buy, like little tools and gadgets for seed saving, which can absolutely be useful. But a lot of time, just a little bit of creativity can save you from having to buy pretty much anything. And being present, curious, and observant, really the most important thing is just being observant in the garden. That is going to give you so much useful information just for gardening in general, but specifically for seed saving. All right. So let's get into growing for seed. So a lot of growing for seed can absolutely be the same as just growing to eat or growing your flowers. But there are maybe a few points you might want to consider. So we'll briefly go over what some of those might be. And we'll look at 3 easy and common crop types and what you might want to consider as you're growing. Specifically, the common bean, tomato, and pea. And then real briefly, we'll touch on some maybe not quite so easy to save seed from crops, which are squash and corn. But we'll focus more on the bean, tomato, and pea, and we'll kind of breeze by the squash and corn a little bit. So the things you want to think about is how is your plant pollinated? And so to know how it's pollinated, you need to know, or it's good to know what type of flower your plant produces. Like, does it have the male and female parts? Are they separate? Do insects pollinate it? Does the wind pollinate it? Does it pollinate itself? And that will have big implications for isolation requirements. And so what are isolation, what do we mean when we talk about isolation for seed saving? Well, if you have a green zebra tomato right here, and it's interplanted with a red cherry tomato, It is totally possible, since it is the same species of plant, that they could pollinate each other. And then the seed that you would save from that would not be necessarily be like, you wouldn't be able to be certain that, yes, this is my green zebra tomato seed, or yes, this is my red cherry tomato seed, because they could have cross-pollinated. So when we're talking about isolation, we're talking about keeping that green zebra tomato and that red cherry tomato far enough apart that when you save seed from them, you can be pretty sure that they did not pollinate each other and that you're going to get a hybrid of the two. So spacing requirements and maturity for some crop types can be different from market growing for seed saving. We'll get into that a little more later. Spacing requirements, I don't think we'll go in today because for most things that's pretty much the same. But maturity, just offhand, cucumbers are a crop type where when you harvest them to eat, the seeds are not mature yet. And so for cucumbers, if you want seed from that fruit, you're gonna leave it on the vine until it's just about rotten before you harvest it for seeds. Yeah, and then how many plants you want to grow for your seed saving goals. That can totally depend on what you're going for. I think for most backyard seed savers, just growing as many plants as you normally would is going to be sufficient for seed saving goals. But since we're a seed bank here at Seed Savers Exchange, growing seed for genetic maintenance and preservation, we have a minimum number of plants that we'll grow to save seed from based on crop type, so that we know we're preserving the genetics. But for backyard seed saving, that's not usually an issue. Okay, well, let's start by getting into the common bean. And so for beans, I did include the scientific name here, Phaseolus vulgaris, and we'll get into why that's important on the next slide. But for beans, they are easy to save seed from, largely due to the fact that they have a very small isolation distance of 10 feet. And the reason that this isolation distance is so short is that they have perfect flowers. So they produce pollen and receive pollen just in the same flower, and they are self-fertile. So they pollinate themselves. By the time a bean flower opens, chances are it has already pollinated itself. And so it makes it much less likely, still definitely possible, but much less likely that a bee is going to come land on your tiger eye bean over here and then fly over to your shield to a different bean and cross pollinate them, because they're already pollinating themselves by the time they open. And so because of that flower structure, beans are very easy to save seeds from. And so the reason I included the scientific name is that for beans specifically, there are a lot of different things that we call a bean, but they are different plants. So for example, a lima bean is different from a common bean. You can see, its scientific name there, Phaseolus lunatus. So you could grow a lima bean right next to a common bean, and it's fun. They will not cross-pollinate each other because they're different species of plant. So you also have some other common beans that you might grow are runner beans, African pea, fava bean, adzuki bean, or tepary bean. So they're all called bean, but you could grow them all right next to each other. And they won't cross-pollinate unless if they are that same species of plant. And so if you're wondering if you're maybe worried about knowing what species of plant you're growing, if you bought it from a seed catalog, there should be this scientific name written on it so that you can know. And otherwise, if you got it from someone and they're not sure, that might make it a little more tricky. You might have to do some Googling to try and sleuth out what it is for sure. So next on our easy crop type list is tomatoes, and they are just like beans. They have a recommended isolation distance of just 10 feet because they have those perfect flowers that produce and receive pollen. and they fertilize themselves. So yeah, by the time that flower opens, it has already pollinated itself. So there's still a chance that a bee could go around and pollinate, but it's much less than other crop types. And pea, this is another very common plant to save seed from because it is also very easy compared to some other crop types might be a little more difficult. And it's because it has the same type of flower and pollination system as bean and tomato. Perfect flowers, self-fertile, pollinating its own the same flower as it opens up. And so there's just that 10-foot isolation distance. So we're gonna just kind of breeze through this, but just to get a different crop type, squash can be more difficult to save seed from if you don't have a lot of space to work with. So the recommended isolation distance for squash is 800 feet. And this is because it is pollinated by insects. And you have monoecious flowers, which means that your male flower and female flowers are totally separate. They do not pollinate themselves. They're completely dependent on insects to pollinate them or people. But for that reason, it's a lot easier for them to cross pollinate with other squash. And corn is, for us at Seed Savers Exchange, the most notorious crop type. Only because there's so much corn around us. But corn also has a recommended isolation distance of 800 feet. But for our purposes here at Seed Savers Exchange, we basically just operate under the assumption that all air is contaminated with other corn pollen. So we hand pollinate ours. But the reason corn needs such a high isolation distance is that it also has monoecious flowers. So you have your tassels producing pollen, and then you have your silks on the ears that are receiving the pollen. But insects don't pollinate corn. The wind does, which makes it even more difficult than squash because we have to bag the tassels, bag the silks, just to make sure they're not coming into contact with pollen in the air. However, if you just, for your backyard corn seed saving, if this is something you're interested in, if you have about 800 feet of isolation from other corn, you're probably gonna be good. So that's just a little introduction to what you are probably going to be thinking about when you're thinking about saving seed from certain crop types. And those were just a few to look at, but kind of the things we were thinking about for those crop types will apply to others as well. So one of the tricky things, if you're new to seed saving, is knowing when your seed is ready to be harvested, because it really depends. And so, of course, it's good to just research your crop type if you're wondering about it. But some indicators are the color of the seed or fruit, the hardness or softness of the seed or fruit, how easily the fruit or pod detaches from the stalk, and the color of the seed embryo. So let's look at a few examples here, and we'll start by looking at some dry fruited crops. So dry fruited crop is going to be things like beans or peas or your brassicas, like your broccoli and kale, where the seed is produced in a pod. And so you will let that pod dry on the plant, and then you're just harvesting seeds from a dry pod, and the seeds themselves are rather dry. And this is as opposed to wet fruit crops such as tomatoes or watermelon, where you will be harvesting seed out of a fleshy, wet fruit. So for these dry fruited crops, such as all your different kinds of beans, or peas, or your broccoli and brassicas, you're going to be looking for a hard seed coat or the outside of the seed. So if you take a bean and you pinch it between your fingernails and it is like squishy or kind of bendy or malleable rather than hard, chances are it could need some more time to mature. A dry seed pod is a really good indicator of your of the seed being ready for harvest. So I in the upper right hand corner included have a progression here of a bean pod going from green all the way to this just dried out brown color, which is what you want. Those far two bean pods are great to harvest from. All brown, dried out, probably got some like moldy, speckly looking things on it. That's a good sign that your bean is mature and ready to harvest. Same for peas. And plants are smart. They know when their seeds are mature and ready to go out into the world. And so for some crop types, the seed pods will start to shatter or open to release their seeds. And so it can be kind of a balance of getting to the seeds before they're all dispersed, but not going in too soon before they're not mature. So you can see this photo of, I believe it's a collard seed pod. It will just showing how the pod opens up on its own to start scattering those seeds. So with that example, if you had some collard plants that you were going to harvest seeds from, you would know that those seeds were ready if you were starting to see some of those pods open. And yeah, again, that's a balancing act of not waiting too long, but you'll probably want to let a few of them, the earliest ones, start to open. And the color of the seed will, for some things, change very dramatically. So in the bottom right-hand corner here is a scarlet runner bean. And when it is immature, it is this bright pink color. You can see that in the green pod. But when they are mature, they turn into this black seed with speckles of maroonish, pinky, purple colors. And so that is an example of a very dramatic change between the mature dry seed and the immature when it's not ready yet. All right, so here are wet, fleshy crops. So when you're harvesting one of these for harvest readiness, chances are it's going to be at or past market maturity when the seed is mature. And so I have a picture in the upper right hand corner here of an eggplant. You can see the one on the left looks just perfect for eating. It's a bit darker in color, it's a bit smaller. And the one on the right, though, is great for seed saving. You can see the color is a bit brighter, it's a bit larger, and it's cut open here, and you can see the difference in the seeds. So in the right one, you can see there are eggplant seeds in there that look plump and mature. And you can see in the one on the left there, you can't really see the seeds. They're still developing. And this cucumber down at the bottom is just perfect for seed saving, the more orangey brown one, and you can see it next to a light green one, which is probably what you're looking for eating for that variety. So being familiar with your fruit and what it's supposed to look like at market readiness is important for these. And another thing that will be helpful is how soft the fruit is. So when the seeds are mature, chances are it's going to be pretty soft to the touch, or it'll have some give. Okay, so kind of taking a step back to those dry crops like the beans, peas, and brassicas. Um, let's look at what processing looks like for a little bit here. So with these dry crops, processing is pretty straightforward. Um, Basically, you just want to dry it down. So after you harvest, and ideally it has dried on the plants, but after harvesting that, you want it to dry some more. And this is just as simple, can be as simple as laying them out on a screen or just on a countertop. And depending on your conditions, you can either put fans on the seed to help with the drying and get more airflow, or for most home seed savers, you honestly don't even necessarily need the fans. Just letting them sit out for a few days, up to maybe 2 weeks, will be enough for the seeds to finish drying out. But some things to think about when you're setting them up to dry is that you want it to be ideally just a single layer, but if that's not possible, thin layers. And if you do have them in multiple layers, if you just are passing by it, just kind of rustle them around a bit once or twice a day so that different parts of the seeds are get different exposure to the air. And one method is if you have mesh bags, you can hang them up. That's another option to rather, some people maybe have pest issues, worried about mice getting at their seeds. But if you're hanging them up in mesh bags, that's much less of a concern. And one thing is it's best to have them out of direct light. So if you have a very sunny window, ideally do not put them right in front of that. Put them somewhere where they're not getting that direct light. Um, all right. And so when you do have your dry seeds, chances are some of them are going to be immature seed that are empty on the inside or just not well developed. And you'll probably have some plant material mixed in too. And so threshing, screening, and winnowing are kind of the methods to clean that seed up so that you're left with just some good seed to plant for the next year. And so this is a place where you can really get creative. Um, so for threshing, this is when you are physically separating seed from the plant material containing it. And this can look like so many different things. Like, yeah, just smashing it between your hands, rubbing it against some sort of surface that breaks it apart. You can put things in bags and smash the bags. Basically, wherever your creativity takes you to just break stuff apart. And then if you have screens, those can be very useful for things like carrot seeds, for example. That might be what he's working with here. I'm not sure. Um, but if you have a screen size that is slightly smaller than the seeds you're working with, that can help separate out these small bits of plant material and maybe the smallest seeds that are more likely to be immature, so that you can separate them from your good seeds. But not probably most people don't have screens, and that is totally fine for most backyard seed savers. And another part of processing your dry seed is winnowing, which is just using airflow to separate plant material and immature seeds from your good seed. So good seed is going to have weight to it, whereas the chaff and the immature seeds are not going to have so much weight to them. So by using some airflow, you can very efficiently separate them. Here's a picture of someone using a fan, just pouring the seed in front of the fan. But honestly, you can use your breath a lot of the time if you just have like a open bowl, put your stuff in, you can use your breath to winnow out the lighter stuff or go outside and use the wind. This is, again, another great place to just get creative. And this will look very different depending on what quantity of seed you're working with. Okay, so for wet processing, this gets a little more detailed and crop type specific, but we'll um, just go over some good things to think about. So one is extraction of seed from the fruit. For some crop types, it's ideal to ferment the seeds, and then after you've fermented it, you need to decant and rinse to separate the seed from everything else. And then, of course, those seeds that are now very wet will need to be dried. So extraction, this can look different depending what you're working with. I have a picture here of eggplant that was put into a food processor, and this is used just very quickly because, of course, the food processor can cut the seed. And there's a specific blade we use, and I'm so sorry, I cannot remember which one it is, but that minimizes the chances of cutting the seed. But that just helps to kind of get the process started. And I also have a picture here on the right of someone just physically pulling seed out of a watermelon. And so ideally, if you can exclude as much pulp or pieces of the fruit as possible, that'll make your life easier down the road because eventually that will have to get separated from the seed. And so, oh, dough blade. Oh my gosh, I had it right in front of me the whole time. We use a dough blade in the food processor for eggplant specifically. All right, so for wet processing, if you want to try your hand at fermenting tomato and cucumbers, that's what we do highly recommend fermenting for to increase your germination because those seeds come out of the fruit with a coating on the seed that inhibits germination. And so this fermenting process breaks down that coating so that when you do go to plant them, they're going to have a better germination than if they were not fermented. Now, this being said, I do hear from people every once in a while that they never ferment their tomato seeds and they're always fine. So maybe you can get by without doing this, but if you're wanting to give it a try, we'll look at it. We'll kind of look at how to do that here. And some other crop types to consider it for are watermelon, melon, and squash. Those, it's more of an optional thing to just get a really good germ rate rather than the tomatoes and cucumbers where it is more commonly necessary for a good germination rate. So the fermentation process boils down to basically just leaving the seeds in the juice mixture of whatever fruit you got them from. So for example, with a tomato, you're just squeezing the seeds out of the tomato. And of course, naturally some pulp and juice are coming out too. So just leave them in that juice mixture in a warm location in an open container, stirring occasionally. And during this process, your good, healthy, mature seeds are heavy and they will sink to the bottom of whatever container you have them in. And this whole process takes, depending on your temperature, from 1 to several days. I think for us, it usually takes 1 to 2, but it can take a little more than that if you have colder temperatures. This picture in the upper right-hand corner on the left one is kind of the beginning or a not quite done yet tomato seed fermentation. And the one on the right is covered in mold, which is a good indication that your fermentation is good and complete. And yeah, on the bottom there we have some cucumber seeds in their pulp. So after your fermentation is done, you've got that good mold layer on the top. It's been 1 or a few days. You will you'll use water just to separate the seeds from everything else they're in. So just by pouring in water, dumping it out several times, you will end up with mostly just the good seed at the bottom of your container. And the stuff that's coming out in the water that you're dumping out is gonna be the pulp and juice and immature seeds. And this is also important for getting sugars and starches off the seeds. Um, yep. And then after that, you can rinse them. And that again is good for the sugars and starches and removing those from the seeds, as well as getting those last stubborn bits of pulp and debris out. Okay, and then after that, it's just important to dry. And since these are soaking wet, it is more essential to get them in a single layer. And if you have screens and fans, that's perfect. We find that coffee filters are exceptionally great for tomato seed. And again, if you can avoid direct sunlight, that's great. And you'll probably want to let them dry a few days to up to 2 weeks or so, but probably just a few days if you have fans on them. All right, I'm gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna skip past that. And so for storage, you just want to consider that you want to create the opposite environment of where seeds like to germinate. So you want dry, dark, cold, and no pests, no insects, no mice. And real quick, it's important to know if your seeds are dry enough before storing them. And so just some things to think about is that if you're applying pressure with your fingernails, seeds should break or shatter, not bend or squish. And then passing them on. Once you have saved seeds, it brings so much joy to you and to others for you to share them. A great place to do this is on the Seed Savers Exchange, which is on our website, or it is a publication that we put out each year. There's the Community Seed Network. If you Google that, their website will come up. Seed swaps, look for seed swaps in your area. You can donate your seeds to a seed library or share with family and friends, either as seeds or if you have extra transplants. Those are some great ways to pass on your seeds. Okay, well, I think we're at the time where we've got just a few minutes left if we have any questions.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Brianna. If anyone has any questions for Brianna, please type them in the chat. Um, I also want put in the chat for people who might not know that the Winnetka-Northfield Library has a seed library at both branch locations, Winnetka and Northfield, with over 145 varieties of heirloom seeds that you can check out, just like a book. And except you don't have to return it like a book. You just plant it and hope that it grows. You may save your seeds and bring them back to the library to share again. That's optional, but that's great. And we do get many varieties from the Seed Savers Exchange. So
Awesome.
that's awesome. Thank you for
Yay.
being there.
Yes.
And I put a link to our website with the seed library info in the chat if you're interested. But we're really proud of this new seed library. We've had it a couple seasons now, and it's been gaining popularity. It's been really great.
Oh, that's such an awesome resource to have in your community. A great way to connect with seeds. That's so cool.
Yeah, it really is. All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm gonna launch a quick poll to get an accurate count of viewers in case some of you are more than one of you sitting there watching this. But if there's no questions, that could either, I mean, for other presentations, I might think they're stunned into silence, but maybe for your presentation, I would think you're just so informative that it's hardly left any questions there.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, I do have to say, you guys are by Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Chicago area.
Yes, we're Winnetka and Northfield are northern suburbs of Chicago.
All right. Well, uh, uh, Seed Savers Exchange, we are situated on a property of about, oh, I see someone raised a hand. But real quick, we're on a property of about 900 acres with beautiful hiking trails, awesome display gardens, a visitor center. I highly recommend coming and visiting us. And we have several events going on this year for our 50th anniversary. It's a great place to visit.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, you're not too far,
Not
but
too far.
a nice little drive away.
Oh.
That's doable. Okay, so the person who raised their hand is asking if the recording will be available because they joined in late. And yes, we are recording this, and I will email a link to that recording probably tomorrow, and that'll you'll be able to view that. So thanks for asking. We do have another question that came in. What is the fee for seeds through the exchange?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So, this is something I didn't cover, but the exchange, yeah, so seeds are listed by growers throughout mostly the United States, but the world, and people can set their own prices. But the suggested guideline is $3 for small seeds or $4 for your larger seeds like sunflowers or squash. And Seed Savers Exchange, we do list a few thousand varieties on there as well. And so those are the pricing guidelines that we follow. Just to cover the packing and the shipping of those seeds. And then we also do apple scion wood, some grape scion wood, and then some potato tubers sometimes, and some vegetative alliums and Jerusalem artichokes. And those are $5. So, yep, just enough to cover shipping and handling, and otherwise the seeds themselves are technically free.
Awesome. My colleague at the library who manages our seed library is watching tonight and chimed in to say that the Seed Savers Exchange is a great place to visit. So fun. That's the quote.
It is. Yeah, yeah, like I said, there's beautiful hiking trails. There's trout fishing. If you want to go trout fishing, the gardens are awesome. And yeah, and then we're right next to Decorah, which is such a fun little town too to visit.
You're next to what?
Oh, Decorah, which is a fun little town to visit.
Okay. Yeah, personally have not heard of it,
Yeah,
but I'd love to go visit. Cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, but they could always look at the Seed Savers Exchange website. I'm sure there's info there. Probably contact information if you have any pressing seed saving questions. Um,
Definitely. Yep. There's a lot of information on our website for sure.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Brianna, for sharing this information and perfect time of year. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
now's the time to plant your seeds, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I hope people are excited and scheming about what all they're going to get up to in their gardens. I know I am.
Yeah, me
Yeah, it's exciting
too.
time.
Awesome. All right. Well, yes, happy upcoming spring, everybody. And thank you, Brianna, for helping us kick it off.
Great. Oh, thank you so much for having me, and happy gardening to everyone this year. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.